All right, so a little while back, I made a video about the Logitech C920 and the Razer Kiyo, basically comparing the two webcams side by side to hopefully help you make a better, more educated purchasing decision. Since uploading that video, it's done actually pretty well, so thank you for those who have checked out the video. The video actually did get the attention of a company called Nexigo, and they asked me to basically recreate this video, but include their webcam, the Nexigo N660p. This video is going to be a bit longer than some of our other stuff, so feel free to check out the timestamps down below and skip ahead to where you'd like to go. But yeah, before we plug this into the computer, let's go ahead and unbox this thing and just see what we're looking at spec-wise. The unboxing for the Nexigo is pretty straightforward. You get some documentation and also the webcam itself. Imagine that. The N660p can shoot up to 1080p at 60 frames per second. It has a 6.5-inch non-detachable USB cable and comes in 3 different color options: black, pink, and white, which is the one that I received. It has the traditional hinge mount for your monitor and has this nice little ball joint allowing you to maneuver the camera in a variety of different angles. The Nexigo also has a 1/4-inch mount in case you wanted to use this with a tripod or something, and oh yeah, it even has a nice little built-in privacy cover, which is a nice little touch. Now let's go ahead and plug this into the computer and see how it stacks up against some other webcams. All right, so we're at the computer right now. Currently, I have all 3 webcams going at the same time. I will have every single screen labeled as to what webcam I am using. I'm gonna be toggling back and forth, just kind of trying to get a few different examples, a few different reference points, so you can compare for yourself and decide what webcam looks best for you. Just for information's sake, I do have all 3 webcams set to 1080p resolution. The Razer Kiyo and the Logitech C920 are at 30 FPS per their limitations, and the Nexigo is set to 1080p at 60 FPS. But with that little bit of information out of the way, let's go ahead and take a bigger look at probably what is the most common webcam I would say out there is the Logitech C920. And yeah, it's kind of aged a little bit in comparison to what we have seen recently from other webcams. Like I said, the Logitech is at 1080p 30 FPS right now, and right off the bat, although it is set to 1080p, you can kind of tell that the picture quality isn't super sharp. It doesn't necessarily give you the cleanest image quality. You do see some noise, like kind of in the dark gray areas here, and especially towards like the shelves and the dark walls in the back behind me. That being said, as far as a plug-and-play webcam goes, it gives you a pretty solid experience overall. The default settings and the auto white balance does a fine enough job when using this webcam, and probably the biggest strength of the C920 is still its autofocus. I've always found the C920 to have pretty decent autofocus, and I've never really had issues with it losing my face, even as I kind of move around and wave my hands around. You might see it work for just a quick second, but it's nothing that you find obtrusive or annoying. If you're doing some sort of conference call, an interview, any kind of Zoom meeting, anything like that, where you just need a webcam for obvious reasons, I think that that'll definitely suit your needs just fine. I think if you have something like this for live streaming, you can of course dial in your settings if you don't want to have that autofocus, but the autofocus is really solid on the camera, and I don't think it's a big deal if you leave that on. And now moving over from the Logitech, we can switch to the Razer Kiyo. Now, this camera, probably out of the 3, I'll say is definitely the best looking out of these 3 web cameras. Just the overall image clarity is really nice. The built-in ring light, while a little bit gimmicky, is something nice to have depending on your situation. But yeah, I think if you're looking for something to give you the best overall resolution, or I should say the best like image quality, the Razer Kiyo is definitely the one to get. It's night and day. I mean, if I switch over to the Nexi, switch to the Logitech, and then switch to the Kiyo real quick, I mean, it's everything looks a lot sharper. I don't know if that's due to software reasons. I did set everything to default on all 3 of these cameras, so I didn't kind of tweak the settings at all. But yeah, everything just looks a lot more clear. And while I don't have the exact numbers, the Kiyo definitely has a larger FOV compared to the other webcams, which for me personally, I absolutely love. I wish more webcams would have an FOV like this. Now, while the Kiyo definitely exceeds in image quality over these three webcams, I will say that there's something about the contrast and kind of overall saturation with this webcam. And again, I set everything to default compared to that of, say, like the Logitech. I think it's a little bit more inaccurate. If that's something that really matters to you, you know, that's something you can kind of try to tweak a little bit. But yeah, I think the contrast levels, like especially with that wall, it makes it look super, super dark, when in reality, it's not nearly as dark as it looks on camera. And lastly, before we switch over to the final webcam, one thing I do want to mention, if you had seen the previous webcam video that I had done in the past, probably my biggest complaint with the Razer Kiyo was its, honestly, at the time, really poor autofocus. You know, it still isn't quite as good as the Logitech. It still tries to hunt my face down a little bit more, but it's compared to when I used this last time in the last demonstration, in the last review, it has improved substantially. And you know what? If the autofocus is something you really don't like, you can always, in the Razer software, turn the autofocus off and manually set it to whatever you need it to be. So that's always something you can do as well. All right, and finally, let's go over to the webcam that was sent to us for this video, and that is the Nexigo webcam. Now, this webcam, like I said, does support 1080p at 60 FPS. Right off the bat, though, I gotta be honest, I'm quite disappointed with the overall image quality. It is incredibly noisy. I've tried finicking with all of the sliders as best as I could to try and reduce a lot of this like bloom effect. I mean, and you can see like in the corners of the screens here, and like when I kind of hold my hand in front, it just kind of has these almost like God ray effects. I think a lot of that has to do with the glass material that is covering the camera lens itself. There's no screen protector over it. I made sure that was taken off. Yeah, it's just, and I cleaned it too. I should mention, I wiped it down with the microfiber cloth just to make sure I wasn't, you know, being reckless with it or something. But it just, yeah, the image quality, it's super noisy, especially in darker areas. It's got this just weird bloom effect. I'm quite disappointed in terms of image quality. I don't want to completely write it off just yet, because I do want to see how this will hold up in a more streaming application when the window is shrunken down a lot smaller. Maybe the image quality won't look as bad there. But it is nice that you do have that 60 frames per second. But let's go ahead and jump over to the multicam window here, just so we can see all cameras working at the same time. I'll make sure everything is labeled in post so that you can differentiate which camera is which. But yeah, compared to all the cameras, as you can see, both the Razer Kiyo and the Logitech are running at 1080p 30 frames per second, while that Nexigo webcam is running at a smooth 60 FPS. And I can already see in this window, I don't know if it's going to hold up when I upload it to YouTube, just having that camera moved a lot lower in terms of scale has improved the image quality. But that being said, it still has that bloom, or I think it's called bloom anyway, that just kind of glowy God ray effect that you see reflecting off of the corners, and like when I hold my hand in front of the camera, that sort of thing. But yeah, unfortunately, we're still seeing that weird bloom in the corners of the screen. I don't know if that's overexposure or what. Again, I set everything to default, and with the Nexigo, I even tried playing with the sliders to see if I could fix it as best as I could. And yeah, I couldn't figure out a way to really improve the quality in the image. So everything's set to default, but it looks fine. I would say that it might fare even better when we do the streaming test. But yeah, this is how they all look together. You can compare and contrast. Like I said, you can probably tell that the Razer Kiyo is having the toughest time in terms of autofocus. And yeah, when comparing these three all side by side, the Nexigo holds its own in terms of its autofocus quality with the C920. In terms of stuff like contrast, saturation, that sort of thing, color accuracy, the Kiyo seems to kind of be the most vibrant and dramatic, not necessarily the most accurate, but probably looks the most pleasing to a lot of people in terms of the saturation and the contrast levels. But if you're looking for something that's plug and play ready, that looks the most balanced and representative of what your environment is in terms of color accuracy and saturation, contrast, all that stuff, the Logitech, to me, is the clear winner in this category. Whereas the Nexigo and the Kiyo seem to be kind of too far in the opposite directions on the spectrum, the Logitech is the most balanced and the most accurate with how things actually look in my room. How cameras handle low light is also important. So while I have all these cameras running simultaneously, I'm gonna go ahead and kill a lot of these lights and just kind of see how they perform in a more non-professional low light situation. All right, so I have all of the overhead lights turned off. The only lights that I have active right now are two very dim lit lamps that don't provide nearly enough light. And then I also have my TV that has like an LED strip behind it still on. As far as illuminating my face, really the only thing that's illuminating my face at all is my monitor currently, and the webcams are pretty much picking up all the slack after that. Since it does have the built-in ring light, I do want to talk about the Kiyo first. Right now, the ring light on the Kiyo is turned off, and it seems that it handles low light, probably, in my opinion, the worst. You may have noticed right now that with the lights pretty much all turned off and the ring light turned off, the autofocus is searching for my face a lot more. And like I said, I have two pretty dimly lit lamps kind of in the corner, not enough to really provide a decent enough lighting experience for any situation. And the camera seems to be really trying to compensate by cranking up that exposure. And you can see just how lit up this side of my face is, because that's on this side of my desk. I have a white LED, and like from that TV as well, it's just kind of really blasting that light there. And you can also see on my pizza blanket here, just a lot of noise. It's really not handling this low light situation very well, at least with the ring light off, or with the ring light off. So we're gonna go ahead and turn that on. Just gonna kind of crank that full blast just to see what kind of effect that has. Okay, so here's kind of the issue with these webcams with the built-in ring light. They're not, I wouldn't say they're completely useless, but you can't rely on the built-in ring light by itself. You just can't. They don't provide enough coverage. You know, the lights themselves aren't big enough, and they're so focused on such a small part that you can't get that nice spread of light either. So I'm just gonna, this is pretty much the light at its lowest setting, and then I'll just turn it all the way up now just so you can see the difference. And I mean, in both examples, it's really crushing my face and really overexposing my face. And I think you could maybe tweak this in the settings a little bit, but really the ring light helps more when you have a better lit environment. But yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and turn this ring light off now. And then we're gonna just switch over to the Nexigo. Now with the Nexigo webcam, we do get a lot of noise, but that's kind of to be expected when we're not really well lit here. What's funny is that it's kind of the opposite of the Kiyo, where, you know, this side of my face was super exposed, but you didn't see a whole lot of color. This seems to be really picking up the blue light on the side. On this side of my face, it seems to be accentuating that a little bit more. But overall, I'd say for very little light in this room, the Nexigo is handling it fairly well. I mean, like I said, there's a lot of noise, and I wouldn't recommend you know, filming in complete darkness like this. But you know, if you scale that camera down a bit, if you're doing something like streaming and you only like to have a moody RGB environment, then that might be okay. But let's move over to the webcam that I think is the best in terms of how it handles low light or poor lighting situations. And that's the Logitech C920. If you saw the previous video, I did mention that I think that the Logitech overall handles low light situations very well. Again, you're gonna get a lot of crap like all of this noise because of the low light. But with all of that being said, with the poor picture quality, with all this noise happening, by and large, it's recreating the image the most accurate in comparison to the other 3 cameras. I still have mostly my skin color here. I'm not super overexposed, and everything is relatively lit with everything considered. You know, you still want a decent lighting situation when you have any sort of camera. But yeah, as you can see, with a more properly lit setup, all of these webcams do a pretty decent job as far as image quality goes. I would say that if you are recording in very low light, do go for something like the Logitech. It just seems to boost the levels a little bit more evenly. It doesn't seem to give you those like really harsh hot spots and overexposed spots like on your face and that sort of thing. Don't fall for the trap of the ring light. That, if anything, just kind of helps an already decent setup. It doesn't really make a bad setup better, if that makes sense. Now, I never really like recommending using the built-in microphone on webcams because just by design, they're never really that good. They're really only there just to serve a basic need of acting as a microphone. The quality is always going to be subpar compared to even something as simple as a cheap gaming headset. But with that being said, some people just need something that works. So let's do a quick audio test now. All right, so this is the Logitech c920. I don't have any filters or any sort of audio post-processing going on. The only thing I will be doing for these microphones is balancing the levels out a little bit just so they're all about equal volume. I'm just going to read a couple blurbs on the back of this Elden Ring box as a test. So, a unique adventure. Create your character and charge into epic battles with dozens of powerful skills. Face the demigods and claim the shards of the Elden Ring, known as the Great Runes. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and switch over to the Kiyo. A unique adventure. Create your character and charge into epic battles with dozens of powerful skills. Face the demigods and claim the shards of the Elden Ring, known as the Great Runes. A unique adventure. Create your character and charge into epic battles with dozens of powerful skills. Face the demigods and claim the shards of the Elden Ring, known as the Great Runes. All right, so that was the audio test for these webcams. Like I said, none of them are particularly any good, per se. They get the job done. In my opinion, I think that the Logitech was probably the most balanced amongst the 3. You did get a lot of background noise from the webcam, but as far as sound quality goes, it was probably the most balanced of the 3. All right, so now I just threw up some gameplay of Elden Ring, of me just exploring and whatnot, just to kind of give an idea of how these webcams might look if you are doing some streaming. The thing to remember, if you're looking for something budget friendly to stream with, you know, even if a webcam might not look super good when it's, you know, blown up full screen at 1080p, when that doesn't really matter when you're shrinking the scale of the camera down to fit in the corner of a screen. You know, it's not gonna really impact the visual quality too much in that regard. You know, for example, like I said, the Nexigo doesn't really look the best compared to the other webcams, but I do think shrunken down to this smaller size, it does look decent enough, especially for a budget-friendly webcam. I think the fact that it is on that sort of ball swivel mount, that it is nice and flexible to get a certain camera angle that you might need, and the fact that it does 1080p at 60 frames per second is a nice little bonus if you wanted to have that 60 frame per second face cam. And you know, like I said about the Razer Kiyo having the wider FOV, that is something that is very popular amongst streamers right now. So, you know, getting something like that could really be beneficial, especially if you are on a tight budget. I think if you're looking for a budget-friendly webcam specifically to do live streaming with, I don't think any of these cameras are really gonna be a bad deal for you. It really just comes down to what sacrifices you wanna make and what features you really want, and of course, you know, which one looks the best to you. I'd really like to hear what webcam you think is the best in the comments down below. All right, and that about does it for this long webcam comparison. Let me know in the comments down below what webcam you thought performed the best in today's video. Personally, for me, if I had to choose between the three webcams, I'm probably leaning the closest to the Razer Kiyo. And although I do have issues with things like its autofocus, its color and accuracy, and the tendency to appear a little overexposed, I think it's a solid webcam if you can find it in that mid $60 price range. Sometimes it likes to creep up closer to $80, and at that point, I don't think I would really recommend it then. Maybe the C920 would be better. But yeah, that's just based on my personal taste. Again, I'd like to hear your thoughts down in the comments down below. And yeah, that about wraps it up for this one, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you again, as always, for watching this video and checking out the channel. Feel free to hit us up on any of our social media platforms, including our Discord community server, all listed in the description down below. And whether or not you like this type of content, please be sure to let us know by hitting that appropriate like or dislike button. And yeah, that's enough rambling out of me. Thank you again so much for watching. My name is Blake, and for all things tech, games, movies, to anything nerdy in between, be sure and subscribe to Digital Cynics. Have a good one, everyone. We'll see you next time.